I'm Nora Barrows Friedman, and you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. On Tuesday, a new report came out titled A Quest for Justice, October 7th and Beyond, which calls itself, quote, the most comprehensive assessment to date of the sexual violence that occurred during and after the attack on October 7th. It's published by an Israeli group called the Dina Project and partially funded by the British government. According to the Electronic Intifada's Ali Abunimah and Asa Winstanley, this is just the latest Israeli attempt to revive and repackage the discredited hoax that Hamas ordered a mass rape campaign targeting Israelis on October 7th. It's getting a lot of media hype, which is why we're taking a closer look now with Asa and Ali. But before we dive in, a heads up. We'll be discussing violent and sexually explicit content and allegations of sexual assault, so please use discretion. So Asa, from the start, media have played a central role in promoting the October 7th rape hoax. You know, we're 21 months into it, and it does not seem to have changed. Before we get into the report itself, tell us about how it has been promoted in recent days, particularly by British publications.
Yes, that's right, Nora. Because the report is partly funded by the British government, it's been getting a lot of mainstream media promotion here. The news of it first appeared in the Sunday Times, a paper with well-known ties to British intelligence and military establishment. The headline claim, as you can see there, was that, quote, sexual violence was rife on October 7th and that there are now new witnesses. Predictably, the story was pushed online by the usual Zionist voices, but when you actually read the article, the Sunday Times article, there was nothing concrete in it backing up the claim of new witnesses. And it's also worth noting that that Sunday Times piece we saw there was written by Christina Lamb, a Times journalist who's played a key role in promoting Israel's debunked mass rape hoax. Some of her earlier stories, misleading stories, remain uncorrected to this day. And again, there was nothing truly new here in her latest story. It just referred to this report that came out on Tuesday. And the opening paragraph of her article even repeats the claim that among the dead were, quote, young women stripped and tied to trees and poles, shot through their genitals. Those are details that appear to come straight from the discredited testimony of the Israeli hoaxer Rami Davidian. I know Ali will get into that shortly, but the bottom line from this Sunday Times article is this: despite the alarming headlines this past weekend, there's nothing new in the facts.
Yeah. And Ali, it seems that no matter how many times these claims get debunked, Israel or pro-Israeli organizations keep trying to revive them. Why do you think they keep coming back to this particular claim?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is they see this as the best distraction from Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. And here we are talking about it again, though obviously from a very different angle than most media. It's also one of the few narratives that lets Israel cast itself as a victim, specifically the most vulnerable kind, a rape victim. And that carries powerful emotional weight, symbolizing the most intimate and brutal kind of violation. And as we'll see, the report's bigger goal is actually to frame Palestinians collectively as having raped Israel, both literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, let's talk about that for sure. Asa, tell us a bit about the Dina project or Dina project. I think Dina. What is it? Who's behind it? And what do we know about the role of the British government? Why is that significant here?
Yeah, in the report, the Dina Project says it aims to, quote, reshape the discourse on conflict-related sexual violence using October the 7th as a catalyst, what it calls a catalyst, to develop groundbreaking tools that will combat denialism. So a lot of jargon there. But in other words, the group is essentially alarmed that most of the world isn't buying the Israeli government's mass rape hoax. and I think they want to shut down accurate reporting about it. And so there's quite a number of details in the beginning of the report about who is behind it and this project. The report's three authors are anything but independent. So they are the following. First of all, Ruth Halpern Kadari of Bar Ilan University. And Bar Ilan University is a university very closely tied to Israel's secret police, the Shin Bet. Its engineering faculty works with the military and weapons firm Elbit Systems, who, of course, have been the target of campaigners. And the Bar Ilan University also helped set up a college, a so-called college in illegal West Bank settlements. So as we'll see, Halpern Kaderi herself has played a prominent role in the mass rape hoax. She's spent, if you check her full CV, she's spent decades in Israeli government roles, from clerking for the former Chief Justice of Israel's Supreme Court to advising the Prime Minister's office and holding various posts in the foreign and justice ministries. And her current Bar Ilan CV, if you check it, it says she's been on an advisory committee to the foreign ministry for the past 6 years. So, not an independent expert by any means. The second author is Nava Ben-Or, a former judge in Israel's Jerusalem District Occupation Court and a former deputy attorney general. And the third listed author, perhaps most tellingly, is Colonel Sharon Zagagi Pinhas. Colonel Sharon Zagagi Pinhas. And she is the former chief military prosecutor in Israel's military, and she's still a high-ranking reservist in Israel's military, a reservist colonel, part of Israel's kangaroo court system of military courts, which plays a key role in enforcing the illegal occupation of the West Bank. So again, these aren't neutral experts. They're deeply embedded in Israel's system of military occupation and propaganda. And two of the authors even wrote a Haaretz article last year trying to discredit the detailed and credible testimonies from Palestinians about systematic mass rape and abuse in Israel's notorious Sidi Men concentration camp that Nora mentioned in her news report in the Nakab or Negev desert.
Right. And Ali, as Asa said, media are hyping this report with the claim that there are new witnesses and new evidence to support the report's claims that Hamas ordered and organized mass rapes on October 7th as a weapon of war. You've read the report. Does it contain any new evidence, witnesses, or even victims?
The short answer is no. And as we've reported over the past 21 months now, almost, despite the flood of claims about October 7 rapes, Israel has not identified a single specific victim, living or dead. This report changes nothing. Even though it claims to be the most comprehensive compilation of evidence on sexual violence that day, it includes no first-hand testimony of any rape. The only new element is a claim of a single, what they call attempted rape at the Nova Festival. But even that comes with no detail, just a footnote claiming that a female survivor, designated only as A, gave her account to the Dina Project. There's nothing else about that. No new witnesses to that event that they can quote at any sort of length. The report also makes claims that some Israelis experienced sexual violence while in captivity, but again, the evidence is thin. It says 15 former captives experienced some form of broadly defined sexual violence, but only one suffered what it calls the most extreme form of sexual assault. They don't define that term, but it almost certainly refers to Amit Susanna, who has said publicly that she was forced to carry out an unspecified sex act by a captor. Now, Susanna's claims are cited elsewhere in the report, and she's also listed as being on the advisory board of the Dina Project alongside Israeli propagandists Gal Gadot and Noah Tishby. The rest of the claims about former captives refer to, quote, verbal and some physical harassment. The point here is even if all these claims are taken as true, none of it substantiates the central allegation in this report that Hamas organized, ordered, and implemented a mass rape campaign on and after October 7th. So, with so little actual evidence, the authors fall back on racist Orientalist tropes of, hypersexual, violent Arab and Muslim men. They claim, for example, that some captives were threatened with forced marriage. Not that it happened, but that they were threatened. Then they write, quote, the threat of forcibly marrying the female hostages is a recurring theme. The intention to marry off female hostages, which was reported by 6 of the returned hostages, reveals a plan to engage in an act of raping and possibly impregnating them, end quote. Again, they provide no evidence of any such plan. They don't even allege that this happened. This is really just projections of their own lurid fantasies onto Palestinians.
Yeah. What about eyewitnesses? Is there anything new there, Ali?
Again, really the answer is no, but they recycle unbelievable claims from discredited sources. Overall, they claim that there are a mere 17 eyewitnesses that are known for what they describe as a large-scale coordinated campaign of mass rape across the whole of southern Israel on October 7th. You'd think that would have been witnessed by more than 17 people. But of course, although some of the what they say is vaguely worded, from a close reading, it's clear that they're referencing already well-known accounts that have already been thoroughly debunked. One key example is the story of a woman called Sapir, which comes straight from Jeffrey Gettleman's infamous Screams Without Words article in the New York Times in December 2023. Her account also appeared in Sheryl Sandberg's Screams Before Silence, the propaganda film we debunked on this live stream when it came out in April 2024. And I want to show a clip from that April live stream segment. It's a few minutes long. It's actually close to 5 minutes long, but it's important for people just to see how outlandish these claims really are. And this Sapir story and others like it are really at the center of this new report. What you'll see, first of all, is a clip from Screams Before Silence, followed by our discussion that you and I had in April 2024. And the first person you'll hear speaking is actually Ruth Halperin Kadari, the same person Asa just mentioned as the lead author of this Dina Project report. So let's go ahead and watch that.
Who stepped forward, a young woman who hid in the bushes and described that very close to her, a few yards from her, there was a group of Hamas terrorists who pulled by the hair another woman who was stripped from the waist down.
הוא מושך לה בשיער, היה לה שיער ארוך, הוא מושך לה בשיער. היא לא לבושה, ובעצם אני מבינה שהוא אנס אותה. הוא בעצם משנע אותה. כאילו, ממש אני זוכרת את התנועה הזאת. ואז מעבירים אותה לעוד מישהו, והוא חותך לה את השד. הוא חותך לה את השד, הוא זורק את זה על הכביש, הם משחקים עם זה.
So that woman speaking in Hebrew with the blurred face is the one identified by Jeffrey Gettleman only by the first name Sapir. And for those who are listening, she describes hiding in a ditch and seeing Hamas fighters rape a woman, and then one of them cuts off her breast and tosses it on the road, and then they toss the breast around and play with it like a ball. This is a claim that has been repeated by countless media outlets over the last 6 months. The video of her speaking, and it's a longer video originally, was actually presented at a press conference by the Israeli police soon after October 7th. In the same video, Sapir claims that she saw the Hamas men beheading several women and dancing around with the detached heads. That is not mentioned in Sandberg's film because it totally discredits Sapir's account. As we pointed out in our January segment on the Gettleman piece, this could not have happened without leaving masses of physical evidence, including huge amounts of blood and DNA. And of course, where are the severed heads and the headless bodies? Gettleman was challenged about this after his original Screams Without Words article, which was published on December 28th. How could the Times have published such an extraordinary, outlandish claim without any corroboration whatsoever? The New York Times published a follow-up piece by Gettleman and his Israeli co-authors Anat Schwartz and Adam Seller on January 29th to try to repair the damage. And it contains this quite extraordinary claim. The police said they found Sapir's bag where she said she had been hiding and women's clothing near where she said the rapes occurred. And 3 severed heads were found farther away near the bodies of assailants in military fatigues, Israeli officials said without providing more detail, end quote. And I mean, that's stunning. As far as I know, of course, none of that was mentioned in the first article, which Jeffrey Gettleman claims they spent months on and interviewed 150 people. It never occurred to them to ask the Israeli police, well, do you have any evidence? But conveniently, the Israeli police said for his follow-up article after he was criticized, oh yeah, by the way, we did find the heads. But as far as I know, Jeffrey Gettleman and the New York Times are the only outlets to ever claim that the Israeli police found 3 severed heads. That has never been reported in Israeli media as far as I've been able to find. And you can imagine that this would be a huge story. You would have seen it in multiple outlets, not just in Israel, but all over the world. Gettleman just dropped it in passing. He doesn't say if he asked the police if they have crime scene photos of these heads or women's clothes or of the alleged assailants that were found dead. There's been no claim that there is any DNA evidence. It's just a passing sentence in Gettleman's second article, and there has been no follow-up by the New York Times. Surely, if these heads existed, the story told by Sapir would have been a central part of Sandberg's film. Surely the police superintendent that we saw talking about how much evidence there is would have specifically mentioned this shocking crime and crime scene and all the evidence. Surely the women would have been identified, but instead it's just mentioned briefly near the end of the film with no mention of the severed heads.
I remember that.
Yeah, well, that was in April of 2024, more than a year ago.
Wow.
Still no severed heads.
Interesting.
Where are the severed heads that Jeffrey Gettleman told us about? So a couple of things to add here. This new report, the Dina Project report, treats Jeffrey Gettleman's reporting as credible and cites it repeatedly, but it doesn't offer any explanation about how he quoted police claiming they found these 3 severed heads. Those victims aren't mentioned anywhere in this new report. And to me, that just really shows how these hoaxers just say whatever suits them in the moment, knowing that mainstream media will amplify their lies, as we're seeing once again, without the kind of scrutiny we apply. Also, remember this. One of Gettleman's key cases was Gal Abdoush, whom the New York Times claimed was raped and murdered on October 7th. That claim was challenged by her own family and completely collapsed. That wasn't in Sandberg's film, and it's not in this report either. Yet somehow Gettleman's reporting is footnoted and cited repeatedly throughout this report as if we should treat it as credible. The case of Sapir that we just saw is one example that's cited in this new Dina Project report, promoted in the Sunday Times, promoted by the BBC and other outlets. And it's a totally fake story, as we can see. But it's representative of the so-called eyewitness accounts in this report. We've already looked closely at others in our previous live streams, like Raz Cohen and Tali Binna, when we did our debunking of Screams Before Silence. And so people can go back and watch that. I'll just say this report adds nothing new to support their stories. It just rehashes old claims. It's slightly more sophisticated the way it's presented. It's presented in a way that most media, most officials will not dig into it, will not go into the footnotes. They will just accept these repackaged lies at face value.
Ali, you mentioned some of the figures that have been revealed to have been surprise, surprise, completely discredited. Who were featured in Sheryl Sandberg's film, for example. This new report relies on some other discredited figures, does it not? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it really is an attempt to launder and relaunder all this stuff. And it leans heavily on accounts from so-called first responders, especially the group Zaka and two of its key figures, Simcha Greinman and Haim Mazgin. The Dina Project says they obtained information from 15 individuals, first responders, 4 members of the security forces, 4 professional first responders, and 7 civilians, either in direct conversation or through review of their publicly available oral and written accounts. They don't name the civilians, not even the ones who have given public accounts, but I suspect, based on claims they made in the report, as Asa mentioned, that one of those civilians is likely to be Rami Davidian. And you'll recall that Davidian claimed to have heroically rescued hundreds of people on October 7th. He was also a star witness in Screams Before Silence, the Sheryl Sandberg film, claiming to have seen dozens of dead victims of alleged rapes on that day, some with objects inserted into their genitals. He also conveniently said that he went around covering up and removing all the evidence so that no one else could ever see it except him. And he remains the only supposed witness to that scene he described to Sheryl Sandberg. In April, as you know, Davidian was exposed by an Israeli journalist as a total fraud who made up his stories of heroism and used his fame to score lecture tours at huge payouts. Fundraisers were done for him that raised tens of thousands of dollars. The Dina Project uses these sorts of characters to make claims about people found in positions suggestive of rape, partially naked, tied to trees, and evidence of gang rapes and genital mutilation. That's what the report claims these people are seeing. And I'll say more about that in a second. But let me talk a bit more about Zaka. This is the same organization, and these are the same people behind some of the worst October 7th atrocity propaganda, like the totally disproven lie that a pregnant woman had her fetus cut out of her, or that children were tied together and burned alive, crimes that simply never happened. Zaka, I'll remind you, was founded and led for decades by Yehuda Meshi Zahav. He died by suicide in 2022 after it was revealed that he had used his position to commit violent sex crimes against adults and children, male and female, for decades. Even after those horrific crimes came to light, Haim Mazgin remained one of his main public defenders. After October 7th, Zaka raised millions of dollars in donations while its leaders went on global media tours repeating lies about what they had supposedly witnessed. Last month, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that millions of dollars raised through Zaka's charitable arms in the United States and France cannot be accounted for. According to Haaretz, Zaka raised about $14 million in the United States in 2023, but just a third of that made its way to Israel. Nobody knows where the rest of the money is. So this is a disreputable, unreliable organization led by proven liars, and none of these people are in any case trained to interpret crime scenes. They're not forensic experts, they're not pathologists. But the new report repeats many of the same old claims made by Zaka's Grindman and 𝐤𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐨𝐧𝐢𝐜. And here's a reminder of the pair. This is just a brief clip of them talking to Sheryl Sandberg in Screams Before Silence. And again, just a reminder that there are graphic descriptions in this footage. This is a clip of Simcha Grindman again and 𝐤𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐴 of Zaka showing photos to Sheryl Sandberg that they claim show evidence of some of the horrors they just described. Let's look at that.
Okay, I'd like to see some of what you saw.
אנחנו רואים כאן בתמונה אישה שקרעו לה את המכנסיים, ירו בה במפסעה.
As you can see, the body was brutal in different stages. This is a part of the breast.
זו אישה שירו לה כאן, זאת אישה שירו לה כאן.
Over here, and over here, and over here.
Oh my God. I
So
remember that too.
yeah. So in November 2023, Simcha Grindman, one of the men you just saw there, stated on the record that he had not taken any photos of what he saw on October 7th. This is the Times of Israel on November 9th, 2023, speaking to Grindman weeks after October 7th about one particular atrocity scene he claimed to have seen. Quote, asked if he had pictures from the scene, Grindman said, I don't have one picture in my phone. It's enough to suffer for the rest of my life from what I saw. Some emergency workers, he acknowledged, did photograph other crime scenes and sent pictures directly to official authorities, end quote. That's from the Time of Israel. So it's very clear Grindman himself did not take any photos. So what exactly was he showing Sandberg? The Dina Project cites Grindman's testimony from an interview published in a 2024 book called Testimonies Without Boundaries, written by Alon Penzel, a former Israeli military spokesperson. It's a collection of interviews with Zaka volunteers. I find it's odd they have these titles, Screams Without Silence.
They love the without device.
Screaming Before Something.
Yeah.
Testimonies without,
Yeah.
but
So
I
creative.
actually spent $8.99 on this book. And here's a bit of what Penzel writes about his interview with Simcha Grindman, about what Grindman supposedly witnessed in Kibbutz Be'eri. And this is a quote from the book. Alon Penzel is writing in the first person. He says, Simcha continued his testimony and shook me even more. In this building, they found 30 more bodies, most of them women, and all of them were naked. It was inevitable for me to interrupt and ask, that is, there is no choice but to conclude that there was rape here, maybe even group rape. This time, Simcha had no doubt. Definitely, when you see these things, there is no doubt about them. There was rape here, end quote. So Grindman is claiming that he found 30 naked people in a room who had been raped, and yet Israel still cannot identify a single victim or come up with any forensic evidence. And of course, this claim, and many others like it that Grindman and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 and others from Zaka made, are not mentioned in the Dina Project report. In fact, the report does not even mention Kibbutz Be'eri as one of the sites where it claims mass sexual violence took place. So it seems that story from Grindman, one of his many sick fantasies, was too outlandish even for the Dina Project to reproduce.
Yeah, and I'm reminded that Kibbutz Be'eri themselves actually, after the New York Times article, their spokespeople denied that they denied that any sexual assault or rape had occurred there.
Ali, what about photos, videos, and alleged testimony from others in this new so-called report.
Yeah, I mean, it would be easy just to dismiss all of it and say it's a repetition, but because media are going around saying, oh, there's new witnesses, new evidence, we have to get down into the weeds. And the Dina Project report asserts that, quote, a large body of digital materials, mostly visuals, recorded the atrocities of the October 7 attack as they occurred in real time, end quote. It claims that some of these materials portray sexual humiliation and assault, but they do not claim there are any photos or videos of a rape occurring. And that's actually consistent with earlier UN reports that examined thousands of photos and videos and could find nothing substantiating rape in any of them. Just to remind you, this is what the report published in March 2024 by Pramila Patten, the UN Secretary General's Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, states about key claims that are recycled throughout the Dina Project report. This is paragraph 65 of the UN report, which actually rejects a number of the prominent Israeli atrocity claims about October 7th. In the last sentence, it says, quote, allegations of objects found inserted in female genital organs also could not be verified by the mission team due in large part to the limited availability and low quality of imagery, end quote. And then here's paragraph 47 of the same report, which addresses claims about the positions in which bodies were allegedly observed. Again, these are all claims that the Dina report relies on heavily. And so the UN report points to, quote, erroneous interpretations of the state of bodies by some volunteer first responders without relevant qualifications and expertise. Some examples include mistaking post-mortem pugilistic posturing, a boxer-like body posture with flexed elbows, clenched fists, spread legs, and flexed knees due to burn damage as indicative of sexual violence, misinterpreting anal dilation due to post-mortem changes as indicative of anal penetration, and mischaracterizing grazing gunshot wounds to genitalia as targeted genital mutilation using knives, end quote. Another person the Dina Project cites as a credible source is Shari Mendez, a military reservist who was stationed at the Shura military base, which was being used as a makeshift morgue on October 7th. Although she has no qualifications to make such judgments, she has claimed that she saw signs of rape on many bodies. I should point out that the Dina Project is actually full of praise for the Pramila Patten report. So this same report that debunks their claims, they think it's a great report. I think that should be noted for the record. I want to go back to one more clip from my April 2024 segment, debunking the Screams Before Silence film, which talks about the military base and features the same Shari Mendez.
Shura base, which is where all the victims of the October 7th massacre were brought. There were body bags lining the corridors from the floor to the ceiling on both sides. And we never knew what we would see. We never knew what the level of the atrocity would be inside the body bag. As we did more and more of what we were tasked to do, we realized that women were not just murdered. Women were shot in the head so many times that it seemed like there was an intention, an objective to obliterate their faces. Most often, families couldn't be shown the faces of their daughters. And we began to see that some of it was sexual in nature, directly targeted sexual violence. Some came in with no clothing and mostly very bloody underwear.
Did this feel systematic to you?
Yes, it did seem systematic to use sexual violence as a weapon of war.
So now let's go back to that April 18th article in Haaretz, and here's what it says, quote, at the Shura base, to which most of the bodies were taken for purposes of identification, there were 5 forensic pathologists at work. In that capacity, they also examined bodies that arrived completely or partially naked in order to examine the possibility of rape. According to a source knowledgeable about the details, there were no signs on any of those bodies attesting to sexual relations having taken place or of mutilation of genitalia, end quote. The article also says that there were police forensic teams at the Shura base, and then it says, quote, these teams did not document a single case of sexual assault or cases of genital mutilation, end quote. And let's also go back to the UN report, which says that the UN team examined thousands of photos and video clips provided by the Israelis. The UN report says, quote, in the medico-legal assessment of available photos and videos, no tangible indications of rape could be identified.
Asa, how does the report deal with this lack of evidence? Do they just deny it? Are they trying to sweep it under the rug? Hope that, these mainstream media outlets just, what we used to call rip and read. They just take the headline and don't do any actual reading of any report that would debunk the headline itself. What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Nora, this is crucial. It's so important that the fact that the lack of evidence, because you still get responses. It's important not to just say, I think, that, oh, we have to, we can just ignore this. No, I think we do have to get into the weeds and debunk it, because it is still believed, it is still pushed by the mainstream media. You see, I mean, I was posting about it online on Twitter earlier in the week and trying to do some of the initial debunking, and you get responses from some people who say things like, oh, well, Hamas, filmed it all. They filmed it all, and they live streamed it. It's completely untrue. It's important to emphasize there is no visual or forensic evidence of any of this. And for these propagandists and for the people who say that, people like Piers Morgan will regularly on his show say things like that, and actually he relies on Christina Lamb, quite often the Times journalist we mentioned earlier. Yeah. But for people like that, the core problem remains: no matter what claims they make, they still haven't identified a single victim, living or dead, of the alleged the supposed mass rapes on October 7th. So instead, what they do is they move the goalposts in this report by inventing a new legal framework that lets them hold Palestinians collectively responsible for crimes with no proven victims or evidence. And so they argue that individual Palestinians should, quote, bear responsibility for the full range of atrocities committed as part of that assault, even if they did not personally commit each specific act. Jesus. I mean, no, this is what they were saying about an innovative framework, right? Even if they did not commit each specific act or were not aware of its commission by a co-perpetrator. And they also suggest transitioning from a victim-centered evidentiary model to a broader approach that accounts for the systematic silencing of victims. I think that's just jargon to paper over the fact that they're claiming, they're claiming a vast organized rape campaign happened. It's jargon to paper over the fact that although they're claiming a vast organized rape campaign happened, but nearly 2 years later, they still have no actual victims. And to compensate for this fact, they propose lowering legal standards, like allowing hearsay in trials of Palestinians.
Right. Ali, what do you think the bigger agenda is here? Talk about the timing. And also just like, I know there's so many of us who are reading actual UN reports with actual evidence, with actual forensic analysis and testimonies and eyewitnesses, video evidence of Israeli soldiers raping Palestinians in their torture camps. And that is given absolutely no airtime. There are no special commissions. There are no, special groups that are fundraising, it's complete gaslighting. So what is the bigger agenda here? What's the timing of this new resurgence of these hoaxes? Oh, you're muted. There
Yeah, as I said, this is one of the few narratives that lets Israel portray itself as a victim, even while it is carrying out this genocide in Gaza. But this storyline goes even further. It demonizes Palestinians and justifies their extermination, I think, in the eyes of Israel and its supporters. And that intent is almost explicit in the Dina Project report's language. For example, it claims the alleged October 7th mass rapes, for which there's no evidence, were, quote, motivated by an extreme ideology based on explicit genocidal intent and fundamentally driven by a complete and utter dehumanization of the Jewish people, end quote. And, we just heard Shir Hever talking about how Israel, while committing a genocide, wants to appear as the victim of a genocide. And that's exactly what we see written into this report, which also says that, quote, Hamas inculcated its operatives with deeply anti-Semitic doctrines, and these directly influenced the nature of the crimes committed during the attack. It also claims that, quote, it stands to reason that indoctrination to demonize Jews and Israelis facilitated the removal of any moral restraints. Again, we're talking about imaginary crimes that this report is dealing with, crimes for which they have no evidence. And this is about reframing Palestinian resistance to decades of Israeli murder, dispossession, occupation. It's about reframing resistance to that as a continuation of the Holocaust. The message is clear. Faced with such absolute Palestinian evil, anything Israel does can now be justified. But in reality, it's Israel that has genocidal intent and is committing genocide against Palestinians. And as so often, Israel projects its own horrific actions and motives onto its victims.
Yeah. Oh, finally, Asa, the name of this organization, the Dina Project, is itself very revealing. Tell us more about that and what you know.
Yeah, that's right, Nora. The name Dina Project is a reference to a horrific story in the Hebrew Bible, which is, of course, known to Christians as the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 34, Dina is the daughter of the patriarch Jacob, who's also known, a character is also known as Israel, which is where the word comes from. And entering the land of Canaan in Arabic, entering the land of Canaan, which is, and of course is an ancient name for Palestine, Jacob and his tribe come to Shechem, or modern day Nablus, and there Dinah, his daughter, is raped by the son of a local prince. Jacob's sons at first allow the rapist to marry their sister, but they change their mind because he had defiled Dinah. That's the quote from the Bible. So what they do, Jacob's sons, is they massacre every man and boy in Shechem, and they take every woman and girl into slavery. Quote, they plundered the city, they took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field. If that all sounds very much like what Israel is doing in Gaza now, it's no coincidence. Israeli soldiers are often motivated by genocidal hatred and by religious extremism. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in October 2023 made explicit reference to another Bible passage that calls for, quote, blotting out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. People will remember that, of course, the reference to Amalek. Amalek is said in the Hebrew Bible to have been another Canaanite tribe. And even those who claim to be secular, those Israelis who claim to be secular, like the authors of this report, knowingly chose to name their project after a genocidal Bible story. So it's clear that they see the non-existent mass rape survivors from the Nova Rave as the modern day Dinas, and the Palestinians in Gaza as the modern day Canaanites or Amalek. And they're trying to redefine international law, as Ali outlined, so that the Palestinians can en masse be punished for a crime that didn't even happen. Israel's so-called feminists are treating the mass rape hoax as a warrant for genocide. The goal is the eradication of Gaza in the same way that Genesis 34, chapter 34, says that the people of Shechem were wiped out.
It is bottomless. And I hope that this is the last time we have to debunk these disgusting claims. But of course, that's not how Israel and its supporters
It won't
work.
be.
This is their only thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be. And we'll keep doing it because this video will be out there. We'll, of course, cut this as a separate segment and it will be out there. It will be a tool for people to see how this disgusting propaganda works and hopefully to show people how to take it apart themselves and what questions to ask. And we'll keep doing it because this is genocidal blood libel. It is genocidal atrocity propaganda. And we have to do this to rob this genocide of any shred of support or justification it can claim to have.
Well, thanks, both of you. It is a great sacrifice that you make on behalf of all of us to go through these just depraved, hoax-riddled reports. And Ali, that you had to spend $9 on that disgusting book as well. Thank you for doing that. I'm sorry you had to do it. I'm sorry we all have to keep listening to these genociders trying to project onto Palestinians what they are literally doing to Palestinians right now over the last 21 months and over the last 80 years. Thank you both.